What do you want from me?
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time.
Our actors, led by Troy Baker, who played Joel, and Ashley Johnson, who played Ellie, really threw themselves at this role and just gave it their all.
Well, I'm sorry. I trust him better than I trust myself.
Stop with the bull.
Since then, our technology has advanced so much as far as the fidelity of faces and the kind of nuanced performance.
So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
And it hits you on a subconscious level, and just the scene feels more impactful, and just as an overall kind of immersive, emotional experience, every part that now you play just hits harder.
A remaster is really more of a tech art endeavor. This was remade from the ground up.
No matter what we were making, it was going to be compared not to the original, it was going to be compared to the memory of the original.
It became pretty clear that this is going to require more than just like a remastering approach. We really want to recreate this for the technology as opposed to putting a sheen over it.
We have new tools that allow us to make better looking animation, improvements in character rigs and facial rigs.
The characters were rebuilt. We didn't just take the original model of Henry and Sam. We built a new Henry and Sam.
We only take what we have to.
Let's do a side-by-side review. It would stop multiple times just to be like, oh my gosh, just look at that.
Things that make like the shirts wrinkle, the muscles to form correctly, facial details add such a layer of richness and life to the character that someone who wants to play this game again is the thing I am most excited about.
The scene at the beginning of the game, that was one that terrified us to remake. When Joel cradles Sarah up to him and you see their cheeks smashed together, the tears streaming down the face. There's a physicality that we were unable to achieve the first time we made this.
All the art has been rebuilt from scratch. A great example is in the Boston State House Museum. On the lower floor, there's some back rooms that in the original game were generic offices. Now there's like an art restoration station, there's busts of American colonial figures on the walls.
We have a completely new AI core. Encounters will play out in a much more dynamic way. You might play it 10 different times and get 10 different results for how the combat went.
All of that, at the end of the day, is in service of the storytelling. We want to be very faithful to the original experience, to be very true to what fans love about that game, and give them the best version of this game possible. Why didn't we retrofit dodge into The Last of Us since we had it in The Last of Us Part 2? If you're facing a clicker in The Last of Us Part 1, you really need to keep your distance from that clicker, because if it grabs you, it's going to kill you. I think we found a great balance for that in The Last of Us Part 2 playing as Ellie, but it just felt wrong for Joel.
Clickers?
Go.
There's a whole set of mechanics that are appropriate for clickers in The Last of Us Part 1 that would kind of be subverted if you could dodge away from them. It would just be a very different feeling game.
Easy.
Authenticity to the original game drove every decision that we really made.
Put your seatbelt on, Ellie.
Well, what about the guy?
You're in the truck, right? And you see the guy, the hunter, walking towards you. And that rolls right into a combat segment. And it shows a lot of the unique improvements in Part 1.
On the original Last of Us, we had to make difficult, complicated scripting to constantly be unloading enemies, loading in enemies, trying to preserve the illusion of continuity. But because we didn't have that constraint on the PlayStation 5, we can have more enemies all alive at the same time. There's an AI coordinator that's kind of distributing the enemies amongst these positions. So you should be able to play that fight 10 different ways and have the AI respond 10 different ways.
The AI systems have all become next generation, right? They're entirely advanced, but the actual gameplay is very familiar.
The core of, to me, what makes The Last of Us combat fun is that cat and mouse. Ducking down and moving behind a low cover and popping out from some angle you don't expect. The more realistic art style just grounds you in that experience. It makes it more frightening. It enhances the tension so much, and your heart is in your chest the whole time you're sneaking around these clickers. It's terrific.
To get the opportunity to do this again with better tools and 10 years of hindsight and knowledge, it's like, wow, that's like a dream come true for every artist.
We had the original art director of The Last of Us, EP, and we had the new director, Sebastian, going in and really taking a look at every single space in the game.
First question that we ask ourselves is like, how do you make this better? People think when you're doing next gen, it's just more stuff. The actual art direction on a day-to-day basis was more about restraint and balance. You have to keep that focus and emotional goals all the time.
One of the themes of the first Last of Us game was the beauty of nature in this very violent world. Taking Pittsburgh, for example, with the capability of the PS5, we are now able to display a very lush environment.
We focused a lot on lighting. It drastically improved all of our cutscenes. The quality of them just got so much richer and more realistic. It created more shape and depth to our characters.
Who's there?
The first time Ellie meets David, she's feeling alone, she's feeling scared. Shifting the color palette slightly to a blue represents her emotional state.
The work that our lighting team has done and the effects team and the character modelers, everything really comes together.
It's a labor of love all across the board. Every department working on this game loves this world, loves this franchise, loves these characters, and we're just doing everything we can to do right by them, to do right by the fans. We want to play this game too.
From everywhere!
Stop him! Don't let him into the building!
To some extent, the principles behind accessibility are good universal design principles. So thankfully, we're able to think about, okay, well, if this information is only available on screen, well, then it's not accessible to a blind player. Or if this information is something you only hear,
Joel, there's a guy up on that second floor, right there.
it's not accessible to a deaf player. One of the frontiers that we've pushed on the most uniquely is vision accessibility. We have navigation assistance, we have this enhanced listen mode that lets you scan for enemies, and that suite of features enables the gameplay to be played by players who are blind and have low vision. I think that's something quite remarkable in the video game space. There's not a lot of other games I've seen do that, and the feedback we've gotten on that has been incredible.
As she surveys the apartment, her eyes wander to Joel. She steps past the couch. He wears the wristwatch Sarah gifted him, which now has a cracked face.
All sorts of people in the past wanted to play our games, they just couldn't. They just had some limitation that didn't allow them to play our games. So it's really exciting that people that have all sorts of limitations can now jump into part one and again seamlessly transition to part two because they share those same award-winning accessibility features. More than 2 years ago, when we were finishing Last of Us Part 2 and we were working on those flashbacks within that scene for the first game, we got excited with the idea of like, oh man, what if we made The Last of Us Part 1 to look as good, if not better, than what we have done with Last of Us Part 2, which we really pushed the boundaries of like what we could do from gameplay and a graphical standpoint, and felt like if we do that, we could actually come even closer to our original vision of what the first game would have been had we not been constrained by technology.
The original creative vision of The Last of Us, I think in a lot of ways was larger than what the PlayStation 3 was capable of.
The tech of the PS5, it's like an open box of tools and goodies that we can play from and draw from. The 4K, HDR, improved haptics, 60 frames, help us to reimagine The Last of Us. It gave us opportunities to rebuild our characters at the highest fidelity. Not only are the characters more detailed, I mean down to the irises and the pupil depth. You know, you fall into the eyes of the characters. Aside from that, the facial animation is just way more believable. Like all the nuances, all the little subtle reactions, glances, glares, right? Like you get all of it almost closer to sort of the original performances.
So no matter what, you stick to me like glue. Like glue. Like glue. Got it. Good. Good.
We are able now to not only just have the highest fidelity characters in the cutscene, but also in gameplay. It's the same character, so now we can do these seamless transitions in and out. Every part of the game has benefited from seamless transitions and emotional scripting.
Pretty good, huh?
Our stories happen in gameplay, on a stick.
She knew my mom.
All this stuff is designed to keep you constantly in this world.
Riley, come here. Now you got this, go.
One of the things that the PlayStation 5 is really enabling is that we're able to have a density of physics objects in a scene that we could never do before. Like, this has always been the dream, is to have this number of bumpables, chippables, breakables, destructible objects in a scene. It just makes the world feel rich, makes it feel lived in. Materials can have the properties that you'd expect. The turret truck in Pittsburgh, when it's firing at you and it's just ripping apart the concrete and sending objects flying left and right.
Seeing things break, like there's fear, there's a real fear that it invokes.
And it's giving us a much more dynamic range of gameplay to play with.
Surround him!
Our AI tech has just increased incredibly. What we were building the basis off of was The Last of Us Part 2's AI. And it has sophisticated systems for things like the fundamental knowledge model of how these NPCs perceive and understand what the player is much more sophisticated.
Now how the enemies are communicating with each other, how they're chasing you, how they're flanking you, how intense that fight feels, it's so much more rewarding coming out of it from the other side.
Get out!
One of the other big AI improvements is the buddies. The buddies technology that we developed for The Last of Us Part 2 has this very sophisticated understanding of like, okay, this is where the enemies can see their exposure. We not only have exposure, we have future exposure. So buddies can know, okay, that enemy is walking forward and they're about to round this corner. So in 3 seconds, that corner is going to be exposed. So I'd better move now to avoid this enemy seeing me. This really lets the buddies make very complex decisions and maintain that feeling of stealth much more believably. Another big enhancement to the gameplay is that we have this technology called motion matching. Motion matching is this technology that's basically using logic that tries to match the desired movement to a bucket of hundreds of animations. A mocapped actor has gone in and run this whole gauntlet of movements to get a really full set of all the different ways a person can move. And then it's basically every frame trying to find the best matching animation that fits the path of where the character is going to go. And this motion model just gives this really seamless sense of transition. The player's movement is just a lot cleaner. It's this really smooth, organic movement through the space.
First, we just had to build that core experience. And then beyond that, we wanted to add several features that fans have been asking for. For example, we now have a permadeath mode. Along that, we've added a brand new speedrun mode, so players can time themselves. There's a whole community of gamers that just want to see how fast they can play through this game. Beyond that, we added a bunch more of unlockables. So there's all these different outfits for Ellie and Joel that people can unlock. A model viewer mode, so people can really appreciate the details. We added award-winning accessibility features.
Every single accessibility option that we offer, that's a barrier removed for someone.
As she surveys the apartment, her eyes wander to Joel. She steps past the couch. He wears the wristwatch Sarah gifted him, which now has a cracked face.
To my knowledge, this is the first PlayStation game that has audio description built into the game, built into the cinematics.
Now it's nighttime. Joel stirs in his sleep.
And that's really the way we've tried to push the frontier of accessibility on this game.
So much of the identity of The Last of Us is the world.
We revamped completely the art direction. You know, everything from these expansive vistas that not only are they beautiful, but you feel the environments. You feel the environments in a much more visceral way. The rooftops overlooking the Capitol building, for example, like just the breath of fresh air when you go up there and you feel that sort of release in tension. And then, to juxtapose that down in the tunnels in Wilds, and you get that dank, flooded tunnel feel, that humidity, you can actually feel it. All these environments are just completely reimagined.
Now we got our engine on the PS5, those haptics, the 3D audio, the fast loading. It really creates a much more immersive, and because of that, much more emotional experience.
One of the things I absolutely love with the 3D audio in The Last of Us Part 1 is being able to hear an enemy before they sneak up on you. And trying to do a stalker fight with the 3D audio is just so much fun. You're hearing them skitter around in a different room, and you're hearing them trying to get it behind you. having that two-part reaction of like hearing, turning, seeing, reacting, it's just really heightens that sense of just being grounded. You are in this character, you are in this world. Now, with the PlayStation 5, the amount of control that developers have over the DualSense, it's really, really cool. All the guns in the game have a variable amount of resistance on the triggers when you aim them. The way it works with the bow is that at the very beginning, when they're starting to draw the bow, there's a little bit of resistance. And then as the bow gets tauter and tauter, the amount of resistance is increasing. And then when you release the bow, you're also getting that resistance going out of the trigger. When you are aiming and firing the shotgun, you're going to get a haptic vibration on the shot. And then what I think is one of the ways that the DualSense really advances things is you're going to get a haptic vibration on the pump of the shotgun. And what's much more sophisticated about that on the DualSense is that in effect has a little like speaker in it. And it's playing an audio file that comes through in the vibrations. And those two beats is what you're going to feel on the controller.
Looks like a good spot.
This also ties in to the new workbench animations. So if you're seeing Joel taking apart a gun or screwing something in or putting a new stock on a gun, that moment where he's like jamming that on, you're going to get that haptic feedback on that. We have, haptics all across the board, for all the moments you kind of expect, for clambering, jumping, landing, meleeing, getting meleeed, like all those kind of high intensity moments we have represented in the haptics. What I personally absolutely adore is the way we can enhance the really like quiet, subtle moments of gameplay. So it's like when Joel goes in to pet the giraffe, getting that little light touch on the haptics as he's petting the giraffe. To me, that's the essence of The Last of Us. It's the high tension moments, it's the low tension moments, it's all of it feeling grounded. It's you're feeling immersed in this world. It's all about bringing you along with that story in as many ways as we can. And that's what the new technology on the PlayStation 5 is allowing.
Was that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out.
There's something special about that core experience of playing as Joel and Ellie on this journey. Then to take that experience and really honor it and keep the authenticity of it, but elevate it in every way possible, whether it's pipeline, whether it's art direction, whether it's a technology, everything that allows us to make that experience better. Not different, extremely better. That's why, to me, this is the definitive way to play The Last of Us.